Hi, hello there. Welcome to The Flex with Aliyah. Today, we're talking about drive. If that's something you struggle with, this episode is for you. If you're curious about when you're struggling, where that drive comes from, this episode is for you. If you didn't guess, we're talking about drive and what drives us. I'm going to start with a quote. And this one is success is almost totally dependent upon drive and persistence. The extra energy required to make another effort or try another approach is the secret to winning. At the end of this podcast, I'm going to tie this all in back with this quote because I agree with parts of it. It says success is totally dependent on drive and persistence. Okay, so persistence is that continuous effort, going after something over and over and over again. It doesn't say you need to be successful, it just says that you keep making those attempts. That's persistence. Now, drive, I'm going to do my best to explain my interpretation of drive. A couple weeks ago, we talked about motivation. And motivation is the thing that drives us to action. So, what's driving us to go to the gym? What's driving us to participate in a race? What's driving us not to go to the gym? What's driving us to eat unhealthy? What's driving us to meal prep? Those are all questions I'm sure people in the fitness industry or individuals wanting to make positive changes in their life think about to a degree. And I would say drive is an extremely complex concept and very individualized. So, what drives me is not going to be the same thing that drives you, which is totally fine. That's what makes you, you, and me. Me, that's sorry. And I think what drives us are the things we want or need. And as I was developing this particular episode, I really tried to think about okay, if I want to do well in a race, I need to do X, Y, and Z. If I want to run a marathon, I probably should do X, Y, and Z. But sometimes we know what those elements are that we need to accomplish a goal or a task. And I'm sure you can relate that we don't always follow that plan. No, we don't. So then is it really what we need or want? Because do you drive to McDonald's because you really want that burger? Or is it just habit and you need to break that habit? Do you need that burger? So then I scrapped that. And I was like, no, it's not what we need or want that drives us. What actually drives us, in my opinion, are our emotions. And depending on what that emotion is, it's either going to drive us towards action or away from action. And there are 8 primary emotions. I don't necessarily think all of them play a part, or at least when I was going through my experiences, I probably could scratch the surface of all of them, but I think there are a couple key components. And before I delve into those emotions and why or how I think those emotions drive us, that element that is driving us towards action is so potent that eventually it evolves into a habit. So that is what I would say drive is. Drive is stemming from an emotion that's pushing us towards a direction, and then the direction from the potency of that drive creates or evolves into a habit. Sometimes we have good habits, sometimes we establish bad habits. And then we have to backtrack. We have to undo those habits. We have to evaluate and assess those emotions that are pushing us towards that we'll call it a negative behavior. So now I'm going to talk about those 8 primary emotions. Primary emotions are the emotions that they say we're born with and what our body, our brain is wired to. And it causes us to react in certain ways and have certain urges. That's what the emotions do. They create urges and make us react in certain ways, which is exactly why I feel drive stems from our emotions. And the 8 emotions are anger, sadness, fear, joy, interest, surprise, disgust, and shame. All of those 8 primary emotions have examples to them of what they allude to. For example, anger, they talk about fury, wrath, irritability, hostility, violence, even resentment. Sadness is grief, sorrow, gloom, despair, depression, loneliness. Then we have fear. And fear is not always being scared of something. It's anxiety, apprehension, nervousness, panic, fright. A little bit more positive emotion is joy, enjoyment, happiness, relief, pride, thrill, ecstasy. Then we go to interest, which is friendliness, acceptance, kindness, affection, love, devotion, surprise, shock, astonishment, wonder, amazement, disgust. That's comprised of contempt, disdain, scorn, distaste, revulsion, aversion. And then lastly, we have shame, guilt, embarrassment, remorse, regret. Those are our 8 primary emotions. And then, of course, it gets even more involved because there's secondary emotions. Secondary emotions are emotional reactions to emotions. I know that sounds a little redundant, but these secondary emotions are ones that we are not born with. We learn through experiences, through how we grew up, our environments. Those create those secondary emotions. And so now what I'm going to try to do is give you perspective on how these emotions drive us with some personal examples. Because who doesn't love a good story, right? Okay, so like I said, I don't feel necessarily all of these apply to me. They probably could. I probably could give examples for every single one of them. But I'm going to go over the ones that stand out most to me. And anger is one of them. I remember a couple years ago, I broke my ankle. Oh my God, I was devastated. I broke my ankle. I had to stop racing for a little bit, and that was a bit stressful. And then I couldn't be on it because that's how I channel my energy through working out, through fitness. And once I got better, I was working out again, lifting, doing some cardio, even while I was recovering from the broken ankle, while I couldn't be on it. And I think that experience was twofold. My training during my injury was part an outlet, but also out of my fear of falling behind in my training, of coming back and being so far behind my competition. So the fear of performing poorly when I was doing so well before this injury helped me to work out and train through my injury in a safe way. So fear was the one emotion there. And then the example I was initially going to use, after I was able to start running again, I wasn't doing a lot of mileage, and I got so fed up with it that on a Friday night, I just looked around for races and said, screw it, I'm signing up for a marathon. And I literally signed up for a marathon that was the next day. And I did not have a lot of mileage to go off of for that run. But I was so angry that I wasn't where I wanted to be that I was like, I just need to go do this. And that's what drove me to do that marathon off of low snow experience, coming off my ankle being broken. And that anger is what really drove me to just go do it. There's no other reason. I didn't want to win. I didn't want to place. I just wanted to go do it because I was tired and angry from waiting. And I was tired of waiting. And so I think anger does drive us to action sometimes. And it might seem a little weird that it does. That doesn't mean we execute it in an angry manner. Because I've definitely tried working out when I'm angry. And usually those are really shitty workouts. Because things aren't going right, you're tense, you're tight. And I don't feel that's the same thing as anger being the driving force to do something. Like, for instance, I haven't done this personally, but I've witnessed it. Sometimes at races, individuals are at obstacles and they get stuck, and then they get angry and they start attacking the officials there. And the reason they're attacking the officials is because they're angry that they're not getting it, which then could also go into another emotion, which would be shame, that has that embarrassment piece. Maybe they feel embarrassed that they can't complete the obstacle, and then they're also getting angry. Another emotion I think that has driven me is sadness at times. When I was in high school, I had lost my father, and I threw myself into sports. Nothing else mattered but sports. And I used it as a distraction and deflection, which, yes, it absolutely helped my performance in a weird, ironic way. But sadness is actually what drove me to that. And it was also the way that I felt I could most connect with him without him actually being present, which is also sad. That the only way that I feel like I can remain connected is through sport. And that's what I used when I was growing up. That fueled me being sad. I had already mentioned fear, but I have another example for the fear one. I had back surgery back in 2015, and coming out of that surgery, holy moly, that was rough. I needed help. I couldn't even get out of bed. I couldn't get into the shower or get up from the toilet, anything by myself because of where it was on my back. I had to have assistance. So my mom and my sister were helping to take care of me. And it was really hard to be a self-sufficient person who now needs to be taken care of. It's really hard. And while I was recovering from that surgery, I decided I was going to do a figure competition. I was going to use that to help get me back and balance out my muscles from where they had the surgery. And that means, okay, where they cut into me on my back, now I'm not balanced on my left side and right side. And bodybuilding, you want that balance. You want symmetry in your body. And that is why I wanted to do it, but I was actually scared. I was a little fearful because I need to be comfortable. And parading around on stage in next to nothing seems very uncomfortable for me, which is exactly why I did it. I wanted to do something that would push me in a way to conquer something that I had never done before and was uncomfortable to do. And you're damn right I did it. And I did pretty damn good. I still felt nervous about it. And that pushed me to be better. And it allowed me to take skills now that I've acquired and apply them to my own athletic training as well as athletes I work with, both from a physical standpoint for training and for mental training. Because I see fear a lot in athletes, whether I work with them or not. Fear of failure is huge. That anxiety before a race, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. People really can work themselves up into a tizzy, which ultimately hurts their performance. But it still drives us to action. Similarly, when I talked about motivation a couple weeks ago, there was that avoidant behavior. And avoidant is you're trying to avoid failure, which is linked to fear of failure. Whole nother social psychological topic. But fear does drive us. I think some of the easier examples are maybe you don't go into the elite wave because you don't think you're going to measure up. You're scared. You're worried you're not going to perform well. You're going to miss an obstacle if you're doing an obstacle race. Or maybe you don't bring up a certain topic in a relationship because you're scared it's going to create an issue between the two of you. So fear really drives us to do or not do things. One of the other emotions was interests as well as joy. Those two I feel like are easy for me because I like participating in them. I get a thrill from just jumping into a race on a whim. Like sign up the day before and just go, woo! That excites me. And that motivates me to just sign up for it. I sign up because I don't know what to expect because I just want to do it. I've been itching to do an Ironman. Don't worry, I'm going to do one. But for me, I'll get off from not training for it. That's my whole athletic persona is I'm going to train how I'm going to train, and I am going to be fit enough to go into whatever athletic endeavor I want and still perform well. That's happened in the past because I've done strongman, CrossFit, bodybuilding, triathlons, marathons, duathlons, lots of variety. And that's no different. Like, shit, I'm going to just, sign for this marathon on a whim. Not this marathon. Then I'm going to sign up for this Ironman on a whim. And the excitement and interest for me is I don't know how I'm going to do, and I'm going to see what my body is capable of. That drives me to sign up for those events. And that goes hand in hand with interest. Things that I like, I participate in. And typically I like harder events, not easy ones, because they don't challenge me. They're not satisfying. Even if I do well, it's not satisfying. When I do well in a hard one, it is satisfying, even though it might only be a minute or a moment in time. I am satisfied, and then I'm on to the next thing. The other big thing that I feel drives people, the emotion of shame. Maybe you're not stepping into the gym because you're embarrassed how you look. And that embarrassment piece, I can see a lot in people that I've talked to who are interested in signing up for a group class. They're worried people are going to judge them. They're worried that all eyes are going to be on them. In the grand scheme of things, those other people don't care. But that doesn't matter. What is driving the behavior is this shame emotion. Feeling embarrassed how you look, how you might perform, that you don't know what you're doing, that you feel incompetent. And that drives us to either engage or not. And typically I feel like shame makes people not participate, which is saddening to hear, because how do you overcome that? How do you take a person who feels embarrassed about what they look like, so much so that they're not willing to put their health above everything else? Can you imagine how strong that emotion must feel, that is more important than getting healthy? That must be really hard. So how do we work to handle our emotions to drive us in a positive direction? Because there's no doubt about that sometimes those negative emotions do push us in a positive direction, even though there's a negative connotation or undertone in those emotions. I feel the best way is the hard way. You got to be honest with yourself about what you're feeling. And once you are honest and you confront yourself, okay, I don't like how I look, so I don't want to go into the gym. Okay, now you have a stepping stone. How can you get more comfortable in your own skin? And sometimes the process is, okay, the way that I need to get comfortable in my own skin is I have to maybe start doing things outside, walking, before I feel comfortable going to the gym. And it's a baby step. It's something that progresses you and works you towards your end state, which is going to the gym to work on your health. Because if you are overweight, walking is a great first step. Now, maybe you're embarrassed to participate in a hard race. That's okay. The focus shouldn't be on the goal. It's on the steps you need to complete to get to that goal. Okay. There's a race called Frontline. Very challenging race because you wear a 20-pound weighted vest, women and men. And I know plenty of athletes who are intimidated by that race or have participated in it previously but won't do the same division because they're concerned or worried about their performance or how they might look at that event. They might not care their perception to other people, but to their own view of their competencies. Oh my God, let me tell you, I hate missing an obstacle if I miss an obstacle. Yeah, I am my hardest critic. I would be embarrassed. Absolutely. But if I let that control my actions, that would bother me more. And that comes back to the piece I said in the beginning that drive is really complex and individualized. So Susie over here might be embarrassed because she lacks a skill. The way she can improve that feeling and emotion is by working on that skill. And sometimes you need a coach or a friend or someone to confide in to work through that feeling, that emotion. And it's not always easy to admit that stuff, especially those hard feelings. Most people don't like to admit that they're embarrassed. Most people don't want to admit that they're scared because then that when they say it out loud, that makes it true. So when it comes to health and fitness, these emotions either push us in a positive direction, maybe getting healthy, competing, or a negative direction. I'm not going to the gym. I'm not going to work out. And those feelings get weighted more than the process of reaching the goal. The only way you can shift that is to do the work. That doesn't mean you're not going to be scared. It's that you don't let that scaredness deter you. I'm scared to do things sometimes. And the moment I feel scared, that's usually when I do it. Or I might take a step back. Okay, so this isn't a fitness example, but I remember when I first was wanting to get my hair cut, get my sides buzzed, and I asked my friend who's a hairdresser, I was like, hey, do you think I could pull off this style? And she got really excited. She was like, oh my God, yes. Okay, let's do it. I'm ready to do it. And I was like, because she got so excited and was ready to do it in the moment, I actually had to take a couple of steps back. And I waited a month, reached out to her again. And the next time I reached out to her, I said, okay, let's do it. And then we just did it. But I had to wait a month, which seems silly. And then when it comes to fitness, it might sound unrelatable. It's not that I'm not fearful of things. I am. The difference between me and maybe other people would be that I don't let that feeling deter me. Without a psychological assessment, I probably couldn't tell you why. And it probably really stems from how I grew up, how I was raised, the habits I taught myself over the years. And those became ingrained in me so much so that when I'm tired and I don't want to work out, and I even say, I've said to them, like, I'm not going to work out today. I still work out even though I told someone I wasn't going to. That's how strong habits are. Once you overcome and confront those emotional stepping stones, your habits what then start to drive you. It's second nature. And those Emotions aren't dictating your path. Now, if it was something new, it might make you stop and think, but then progress forward anyway. So to recap, what drives us? Our emotions drive us. And the specific emotions that do affect us are very individualized. So I'll challenge you to stop and think about something that you want to do but have stopped yourself from doing. Assess why you stopped yourself from doing it. And then think about when you accomplished something that was challenging or uncomfortable and what drove you to actually complete it. There was a time when I started training for a marathon out of grad school because I was like, what do I do now? I was a collegiate athlete, and now that part of me is gone. What am I going to do? And to fill that void, that emptiness, or that it could be interpreted as sadness because I lost that identity or that piece, that's actually what drove me to action to go do these marathons. So take out a paper. You can go back and listen to the 8 emotions that I mentioned, and I'll restate what they are for you. Anger, sadness, fear, joy, interest, surprise, disgust, and shame. And if you scroll back while you do this challenge, if you scroll back to earlier in the podcast, I give examples of each of those. So if you need to use that as a point of reference, definitely go back. So those are your 8 primary emotions. For each one, write an experience you had from that emotion. What about anger? What time did anger drive you to do something? What about sadness? Fear? And that will help get the wheels turning to 1, better understand you, and 2, to start creating a foundation for forward progress, especially if one of those are hindering you. And that would be the flip side of the challenge. If you're writing it down and you're like, ooh, this one has prevented me from doing something, write that down and write down why. Because when you face that is when you'll start to adjust what drives you in a positive direction. And I'm going to go back to that quote that I started with. Success is almost totally dependent upon drive and persistence. So you have all these emotions that impact your movement towards action and the direction of that action in combination with persistence. So if you have repetitive efforts, it will move you in a positive direction. If you have repetitive hindrances, it's going to prevent you. It's going to be a barricade, a roadblock that prevents you from going to the successful path. The second part of that quote was the extra energy required to make another effort or try another approach is the secret of winning. And winning doesn't mean the winning of race. It means conquering that obstacle, overcoming the thing that hinders you. And that is a huge takeaway from this. We talked about what drive is, that it's complex, it's individualized, and that emotion is what drives us. And the actions stemming from those emotions eventually evolve into habit. And if you really want to improve, do that challenge I suggested earlier in this podcast. I want to thank you so much for listening. Definitely subscribe. You know you want to. Write a review. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. And what's even more awesome is that a number of you guys have reached out to me and I've been able to have conversations with some of you. And I really appreciate that. It's been a unique experience. Next time on The Flex with Aliyah, we're going to be talking about coming back from injury. There's a huge mental aspect and physical component to recovery and comebacks. Again, thank you so much for tuning into The Flex with Aliyah. I'll catch you later. Bye.